I'm Alex Capulong, the General Manager and Country Head of Plentina Lending. We're a new fintech working towards providing more financial access in emerging markets like the Philippines. We work with corporate partners like 7-Eleven to offer our customers store credit loans from the convenience of their phones. We want to give people the ability to get what they need when they need them. Today, we're going to talk about building corporate partnerships with AI and data. We might have Silicon Valley roots, but Plentina's Filipino through and through. That means we value relationships, which is why we work with our partners to leverage our mutual expertise in data and AI. I am grateful that we're joined today by our partners from Google Cloud and Western Union who work with us to offer more to Filipinos. I'd like to introduce to you our company with a short video, and afterwards I'll be introducing our co-founders, Earl and Kevin. First, I'd like to introduce Kevin Gabayan, the technical CEO of Plentina, the architect of our machine learning algorithm. Just before starting Plentina, he was leading an emerging markets credit team at Google. Previous to that, he was a resident machine learning engineer after Google had been acquired by Bump Technologies, where Kevin happened to be the lead data scientist. And speaking of scientists, Kevin used to be a computer vision researcher at NASA Ames, and coincidentally, being an astronaut was one of Earl's childhood dreams. Now, though not an astronaut, our co-founder Earl Valencia started his career in the aerospace industry as an engineer at Raytheon in the US. Later, he came home to become the VP of Innovation at Smart, resulting in the foundation of IdeaSpace. More than the founding of the Philippines' first startup incubator, he'd also contributed to the development of the Innovative Startup Act. Earl then went on to lead data partnerships at Bridgewater and served as Charles Schwab's digital transformation director, eventually co-founding Plentina as its chief business officer after leaving them. Joining our co-founders today is Ferdy Sapotil, Google Cloud's territory lead for the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. He has been growing adoption for cloud and workspace, including the partnership ecosystem for their customers. Ferdy also spent time leading the enterprise and public sector divisions for Microsoft. He also led all digital services across the SM Group, and beyond that, Ferdy has been actively contributing to the Philippines' business community as a former president and current member of the Rotary Club of Makati, Paseo de Rojas. And finally, we have Sir Jeffrey Navarro, Western Union's regional head for the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and Indochina. He too spent time at Smart leading digital financial services teams after a decade-long stint with Shell. To set the tone for our panel, Plentina's founders, Earl and Kevin, have something to share about the makings of a good digital partner.
Great. Well, thanks, Alex, for that kind introduction. And we're really lucky today to have our partners, Western Union and Google Cloud as well. So while I share my screen here, what I want to talk about really is kind of the lessons that I was reflecting on what could make a good partnership between large corporations specifically, but also AI and data-enabled startups. And, I guess how I reflected on this was, my time kind of actually straddling these two, to be honest, quite complex and sometimes contradicting types of industries, right? So I spent a lot of time with the startup ecosystem, especially in the Philippines, but with Kubo and IdeaSpace, have this thing with Cognity Labs, which is a startup accelerator. but also with Plentina. And we're lucky in Plentina that we're backed by Techstars and Western Union Accelerator Program, and also invested in with 500 startups. So we learned a lot from our investors as well. But then also straddle this other side, which is large corporate, right? I mean, in my time in Smart and how to handle partnerships with emerging technologies when I was there, but also when I was in tech companies like Cisco and Dell, and also when I was leading digital transformation for a number of initiatives at Charles Schwab, which is a large investment brokerage house. And to be honest, it is very complex, but my theory is that, this is the big question that we all have to answer, right? What really makes a great win-win partnership between tech and especially AI-enabled startups and large companies? And people think it's easy, but actually it's quite difficult. So I would like to impart over the next just couple of minutes, just what are my top 3 lessons that I learned, throughout my career, kind of trying to straddle and balance the two together. So number one, why are we doing these partnerships? Like, why are we trying to think about innovation and trying to do all this hard work in order to do change? And my thought really here is that all of this boils down to what? The customer, right? So we're all doing innovations, partnerships, investments, acquisitions, building new products because we want to make the lives of our customers better. Maybe save them money, make their experience much better, or maybe they can make more money, right? So all of us are there in order to make sure that because of our products and services together, large company and startup, we're focused on that single customer that we want to impact and change. The next one really is corporate structure, right? So if you have this basis of we all are in agreement that we're doing this because of a common goal, which is to help the customer, we now have to come to realization that the corporate structure of large companies and small companies is very different, right? So I was talking to my son a while ago. He's 9 years old, and he said, what is an animal that I can describe as startup? And he said the peregrine falcon. And for people who don't know, it actually is the fastest animal on Earth. It does about 200 miles an hour. But how it does it is that in steady state, it's about 60 miles an hour, and then it dives to the ground in order to get food. And diving to the ground does 200 miles an hour. It's just like a startup, right? Like, there's even an analogy where you're trying to build a company when you jump off a plane, and hopefully you build that company and build that parachute before you hit the ground. So I thought it's a good analogy, peregrine falcon, fastest on Earth. But the other one, which I think is kind of large companies, which is like an elephant, right? It's one of the smartest, animals alive. Obviously, one of the wisest ones, but also one of these ones that could be slow and steady, right? So that's something to do. And how do you then mirror these two cultures and just animals there? And I just thought about it with like a couple of things, right? Like number one, how do you use a common understanding of the use of data and AI, right? You can't necessarily have and build AI enabled startups if you don't think about what's the power of the data and how to share the data together. The culture should both be customer obsessed, and also what is the organization, so that if ever you will build the partnership together, there is already some organization at both ends to make sure that this partnership moves forward, right? Because a lot of times inertia in companies kind of gets the best of all of us. And then the last one really is how do we have a common understanding both in the power of doing things together and then doing things fast with experimentation. And I'm telling you that maybe not all companies, both startups and large companies, think about this, but having this common framework between the two cultures of an elephant and a peregrine falcon, I think makes sense. And my last one really here is about timing, right? People think that partnering with startups is a nice, shiny toy. And I tell them, don't partner with a startup if you don't need the specific service that they need. But the best thing really is this part of a strategy that you have as a large company in order to serve your customer long term? And I have this in the slide of like, how do you then graduate your customer through this data journey from information transaction to all the way to predicting their behaviors and their needs. So when you talk about a startup too, you have to also think about, does the startup get partnering with large companies, right? Because I've also seen a lot of startups where they're extremely impatient with the partnership process. And I think that is not the case, right? Especially focused on emerging markets. So it's very important that all of us are on the same page, make sure that all these lessons are thought about. And why? Because if the customer wins, we change their lives, impact their lives in a better way. We, both the startups and the companies, win. So this is really my thoughts. I know it's really quick, and I'd love to dive through this discussion later on in the panel. So next up, I think we have my co-founder, Kevin. So Kevin, please take it away.
Hi, I'm Kevin, CEO of Plentina. At Plentina, we're excited to see Filipino organizations advance their data readiness and leverage machine learning to grow their operations. But we understand not every organization is ready. In the Philippines, it's rare to find data at scale. Whether you're a merchant that wants to sell more or an organization that wants to be more efficient, we'd love for you to build a minimally viable data team. And if you happen to be a merchant with over 100,000 customers, we'd love to see if Plentina can help. Even before Plentina was founded, we've worked with a number of partners, and it's always been helpful when stakeholders have a data leadership team. This team gives your organization a good start to making efficient data-driven decisions and enabling new services. We've encountered a number of large merchants that have yet to make their first technical data hire. If you're one of them, please consider hiring a data professional to organize your company's data assets. Titles aside, this could be someone at a director level or above having both technical and some business skills for a company to collect, interpret, and make your data assets actionable. They might come from a computer science background, so they can at least build a data pipeline by themselves before building a team to do so. It's not necessary, but it would be helpful for this person to be empowered as an in-house hire to avoid bureaucracy. Next, consider hiring a data-driven business lead. This person would possess just enough technical skill to query databases and slice data themselves, and would be involved enough in your operations to identify, measure, and communicate critical performance metrics. With at least a couple in-house data people having complementary technical and business sense, you can start to make sense of the data. You might use a cloud development platform such as Google Cloud Platform or Amazon Web Services. This saves money and time, keeping you from getting into the business of computing infrastructure maintenance. Cloud platforms also make it easier for your organization to collaborate both internally and with external stakeholders. When you've automated enough of your key performance metrics on a dashboard shared with your organization, your team will be able to react to shifts in consumer behavior in minutes and not months. For example, it's been about 9 months since the onset of the pandemic. So hopefully by now your leadership has a good understanding of how the pandemic has shifted consumer behavior. How has each quarantine impacted your consumers' behaviors? It's now more important to work with data professionals to quickly adapt and prepare for the recovery. A minimum viable data team will make it easier for your company to acquire business partnerships. They can help partners evaluate your data assets and evaluate the serviceable market generated from your partnership. Some of our most efficient meetings have occurred when two data-driven business leads across organizations have collaborated. Your data team's insights won't be useful until you've empowered them to drive changes in your organization. So to move quickly, you'll need an executive champion responsible for making sure those data-driven changes happen quickly. The executive should review business opportunities presented by data and champion their execution with your product and operations teams. If you'd like to chat more about how you could be making more use of the data you already have, or how Plentina can be of assistance, please say hi at info@plentina.com. Thanks.
Thank you, Earl and Kevin. Now, before moving on to our panel, we've got a short clip from our partners at Western Union.
It's a really grandiose idea. with a really practical technical solution.
We are a cross-border founding team, come from India, Indonesia, Hong Kong, and Singapore.
We've got a ton of diversity in the program, not only in the founders themselves, but also in the problems that they're tackling to help drive financial inclusion around the world.
We reconcile all of their payments directly back into their ERP systems.
We believe that we will become the payment and credit provider of choice in a post-COVID world. We're glad to have Techstars and Western Union on our side.
I am definitely excited and interested in this. I think it's such a unique combination.
The National Credit Bureau covers less than 10% of the Philippines, and we cover twice that.
The best opportunity for Africans to invest properly over the next decade is to do dollar-denominated investments across the world.
Look at the pilot opportunities and challenge them to be successful.
I'm really glad that the company and Techstars are able to move forward with this even in a virtual environment.
We're really excited about the opportunity for working with Western Union and learning a lot about the expertise in the payment space, and hopefully offering this as an opportunity to really supercharge the financial investigations and compliance functions.
Through our mobile app, we design a saving experience that is tailored towards people coming together, but also holding each other accountable for reaching their saving goals.
We're absolutely thrilled to be working with this group of entrepreneurs. They're a great set of folks, and they're going to do great things.
So I hope that for all of you, we're all here to help you succeed.
Techstars was the first one to really believe in my co-founder and myself. And it's hard to even describe what that feels like when someone, utters those 4 words, "I believe in you."
Those were some great presentations and some videos from our partners as well. Now, as we head into the panel of the day, I want to remind everyone that we're joined by 4 panelists, which are our co-founders, Mr. Earl Valencia, our CBO, our CEO and technical data scientist, Mr. Kevin Gabayan. We're also glad to have our partners from Google Cloud, Mr. Ferdy Saputil. And of course, let's not forget our dear friend from Western Union, Mr. Jeffrey Navarro. All right, so thank you everyone for joining us today. Now, there's a bunch of questions that I'm sure everyone's dying to ask, but maybe we can talk about the backgrounds first. You guys have all had such interesting careers, Earl was talking about earlier being, moving fast and moving slow. You guys have seen both worlds, different DNAs in different companies. So maybe if you could take a chance to introduce us to some of the interesting projects that you've worked on over the years. Anybody can take a slap, and who wants to go first? Maybe Earl, would you like to go ahead and share?
Yeah. I mean, I think actually idea space was a very interesting concept, even QBO, both of them, right? Because let's say idea space really was born out of, can we think about how companies can work with the first specific group by really building an accelerator and incubator, right? So that was interesting. And then what's obviously doubly interesting is QBO, right? Just because it's, I think, one of the world's first public-private partnerships focused on innovation and startups. So just having that and being involved in that is extremely exciting.
Yeah, and if I recall correctly, Idea Space popped up a couple of years ago and started off a storm. We have now a lot more startups coming into the Philippines. And we have seen the impact of that. Kevin, how about yourself? Any thoughts on the projects you've worked on over the years?
So I was formerly lead data scientist for Bump Technologies. Bump was that app where you bump the phones together to exchange contact information. And everyone was bumping photos mostly. So, we pivoted into photos. We launched a couple photo apps. And so, photo sharing was something that we dug into and tried to make it very seamless for people to share photos. Now, because of the work we were doing in photos, then Google eventually acquired us so that we could help build Google Photos, for the product that it is today. So got patents in, Google photo sharing and some Bump Technologies, intellectual property, and then also Android activity recognition, which is the algorithms that help determine whether you're walking, running, biking, if you're in a car,
as well as some gesture recognition for the Android Wear devices, which are the smartwatches.
Sir Ferdy and Sir Jeff, you both have had such illustrious careers actually spanning more than a decade, and you've been here in the Philippines and abroad. You've seen other countries. Any projects that you'd probably be able to share with us that particularly strike dear to your heart?
Probably I can start in terms of some of the projects I've seen, and these are mostly local projects. I just can't disclose the name of the companies at this point, but I can share with you more or less what those engagements are. We did a project for a telco, which is pretty much more in the area of data consolidation and getting real insights coming from customers and really getting a complete 360 view. I guess if you think about it, I mean, it's not really rocket science. I mean, this is a conversation that everybody's been having for so many years now, for the past 3 to 5 years, in terms of just how important data is. But I guess for me, just seeing how you're able to build machine learning models to really get better perspective so that our customers are able to, number one, understand who their customer is, understand the customer better, so that number two, they can customize the services that they would like to offer, and obviously the ultimate goal is that they can predict more or less what their next steps will be. I mean, just seeing that happening from a continuity point of view, it's really exciting. The other one that really I would say is very close to me is one of our projects, which is what we call our contact center AI. I don't know if you've seen some videos from Google a couple of years ago where it's a natural voice conversation. When it was presented, it was like, oh wow! I mean, this is scary, and yet this is something that is going to be helpful. We've productized that solution. We call it contact center AI. Wherein people can now have a human-like conversation with an AI, and the conversation is very, I would say, not FAQ type, but very interactive. And there's a lot of intelligence in the conversation. But for this project, what makes it most interesting is we were able to build some components that are in Tagalog. I mean, when I say Tagalog, it's not the Tagalog translation, but it's Tagalog, Taglish type, or even some dialects. So, which is good for some of our customers who's actually piloting this, which are banks and also some QSRs. Because at the end of the day, especially this current pandemic, the biggest challenge is you don't have. There was a point, especially during the lockdown, that there's really no workforce available. I mean, no one is allowed to go to the buildings, and everybody has to work from home. But most organizations are not ready for a work from home scenario. So there are a lot of customers who are looking for alternative solutions which can address potential decline on resources, on physical resources. But obviously, they still have to respond and reply to most of the inquiries of their customers, and it became a solution that was actually being adopted.
Oh, thank you, Sir Ferdy. I mean, again, we're seeing, right, most people are thinking machine learning, AI, super obfuscated things. And again, what we're seeing is all of this is actually being used to bring the personal back into our lives. Before, scaling businesses and industrialization was all copy-paste. This is what you get. It's either black or red. And now we're seeing, or we're using these things to bring the human back into the way we live, personalized everything, personalized conversations with Google, with an AI, which is quite interesting. So maybe before we move on to the questions about cooperation, Sir Jeff, is there anything you'd like to add about what you've seen over the years, anything that you've seen in the different countries?
Okay, so in terms of my observation, I entered Western Union in a very exciting period in terms of its transformation. So everyone will know the Western Union as a cross-border remittance company. But basically what it is in the past is it's hard currency and you deal with a physical location. And that's how we've been managing and doing the business for quite some time. I entered the point of the company where the company decided to be different and to move into different touch points and direction. And this has been triggered really by to what Earl was mentioning a while ago. You have to listen to the market and to the customer. And if you have the passion of how to serve them better, then you begin to realize that there are certain innovations and changes that you need to do. So 8 years thereafter, a lot of transformation has happened, and we're part of leading those transformation here in the Philippines, which now allowed us not only cash remittances to physical locations, but it becomes the power of choice of a consumer. So if a consumer wants to get the remittances through the top e-wallet companies in the Philippines like GCash, PayMaya, and Coins, at the convenience of the app, they can do so. So that is something new. In the past, we've never really participated in direct to bank. So now we have the ability to also deposit in all bank accounts regardless of where you are. So it's really a complete change from just physical cash, physical location. And now it's really a combination of be it cash, be it bank account, be it mobile money, termination to either a physical location, to a mobile money, or even to a bank account. Any permutation of all of those things we can do. So it's really again, it's about how do we create value, how do we listen to consumers, and how do we make it easier for them. And I think that is the same principle that led us to the partnership with Plentina. And we can talk about that later on, because what we feel is we want to be known also as an innovative company. And in doing innovation, you can do it from inside, or you can also do it through partnership. So I'll stop there first.
Oh, thank you, Sir Jeff. And again, right, we're seeing um, technology being in the same breath as choice. But Sir Jeff makes it sound like it wasn't easy to. We chose to be innovative with Western Union, but there's so many things that happen in the back end to make all of these things work, especially for cross-border remittance. I myself had the experience there, and it's not a simple thing. So when Sir Jeff talks about it, makes it look easy and choice. That's a big decision to take for customers, for them to give them back that freedom, especially at this time where we're all stuck at home. Having different options makes a huge impact for people. And speaking of changes, we have our founders here who have been enjoying these big careers over in the US and Silicon Valley. And then I guess the viewers want to know, right, Earl and Kevin, what made you suddenly say, okay, I want to stop this. I want to stop working in San Francisco. I want to stop working in New York, and then go over and come back, take my skills back to the Philippines.
Yeah. So it's really a dream come true for like a girl who gets to work on financial inclusion in places like the Philippines and the rest of, and other emerging markets as well. Yeah, just from a set of experiences of having met people, in the Philippines that represent a wide spectrum of the most of the Filipinos that are unbanked and just don't have access to financial services, from sorry store owners that are borrowing from 5-6 lenders and paying over 20% monthly interest and dream of a better outcome, but just they're going to have a hard time doing that under those rates, to just everyday urban professionals that are well into their 40s and still don't make the minimum income for a credit card. There are just so many different ways that it's just very difficult to get access to credit in the Philippines. And coming from a machine learning background, you wonder, how can all this fancy technology help someone in the Philippines put food on the table? And so we're thrilled to be contributing to a place where we can directly impact that with the skills and talents network that we bring back, like the sea turtles, we're emulating here. So thrilled to be doing this.
Yeah, and I think it was also kind of a dream team, right? I think Kevin and I know each other for many years already, and we've been staying how do we really use the knowledge we got, and we both met in Stanford, right? And the privilege that we have in order to create change, and at least I reflected when I was working in a lot of investment houses in the US, right? How can we unlock the potential of the Filipinos. I think one of them really is to give them financial access, right? And we think that there could be a better way, especially now with this pivot point of AI and data, that we can really change the game, especially in financial services for this. So we're excited to do that, and especially with partnering with amazing companies like Western Union, Google Cloud, and the other merchants that we partner with.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, yeah. So bringing us now back to our topic with partnerships in AI, right? Anyone feel free to jump in and answer this, but Earl's already started discussing it in his presentation earlier. On Sir Jeff also mentioned it and why he chose, why Western Union chose to work with Plentina. What do you guys actually look for nowadays with partnerships? When somebody says, "Oh, I'm working with AI or data," what are you looking for? What are they supposed to be using that for to make it interesting for you?
I can probably start with that one. I guess from a Google Cloud perspective, at the end of the day, our motivation is to really address the customer challenges. And when we talk about customer challenges, it's not just our customers, but our customers' customer. And AI really has to be able to, I would say, either address or support some of these challenges. And most of our organizations in the Philippines are actually not ready for it. I mean, there are even large enterprises who initially ventured into partnering with education, some universities, in terms of just making sure that we're able to churn the right resources. But again, there's a learning curve, so to speak, before we're able to get the right talent out and be able to be integrated into the enterprise. So I think even with this current, especially with this current condition, a lot of organizations are now really looking into more innovative ways of transforming the business. And AI or machine learning is actually one of them. And the partnerships that we actually choose are those that has the solutions, just like Plentina, that can really address these business challenges. So it's not about how fancy the technology really is, but really how relevant the solution is to the market. So that's one factor. The second one really is the kind of partnership. It's not just really introducing a partner with a customer, but really the kind of partnership, because the partnership has to grow. There has to be some osmosis of sort to support also the organization to, at some point, to eventually innovate and stand on their own. So there has to be some transfer of knowledge. Of course, IPs obviously will be kept by the partner, but at least the knowledge in terms of the value of this has to be transferred so that innovation can also happen on the enterprise or on the customer side, which is rightfully so because they're more closer to the ground. But I think, but again, these are the kinds of partnerships that we're looking at. The ones that can grow with the company, the ones that has a real clear differentiator when introduced with our customers, and obviously the one that also understands the direction of the technology, the roadmap of a platform provider like Google Cloud. I mean, at the end of the day, you would like to be presenting solutions that are, I would say, open, robust, and that can withstand whatever changes without having to replace everything again. So yeah, so just those are the things we're looking for.
Thank you, Sir Ferdy. Again, you've seen it. We see here the three things. I think all of us here have seen it, right? Purpose for what to use it for is most clear. What a lot of us or a lot of companies also look for is the impact that that's going to drive. But Sir Ferdy also touched on something that's often overlooked, is that talent and that execution capacity to make that dream a reality. Maybe Sir Ferdy, if you'd like to expound, or if anybody would also like to tackle that question of, yes, we have intent, we know what we want to use it for, but I guess everybody's had that experience when choosing, right? How do I pick somebody who's going to be able to deliver? And how are people going to know that they have what it takes to deliver?
I guess for my on my end, I'll step back a bit regarding that question and then elaborate further. In the selection of partnerships, To us, what is really important is, do we share the same values? That's very important. And I can say, for example, that we value customer centricity in making sure that at the core of everything we do, customer comes first. When I look at the partner, do they hold that customer also at that regard? And that's very important. The second one is, do we also share the same value in terms of innovation and ensuring that there's that burning platform to say we must do something to make things easier? Do we have that value? So that's one part. Then the other part is, looking at it from objectives and strategy. How do we get there? Are we aligned also in doing this? And first is, it's a good starting point to say that at the core of our business, generally, you have a huge segment of the business that is unbanked. And when we now look for selecting partners, is the partner also has to have that passion to address or come up with strategies that will more or less address the unbanked segment. And are we aligned in terms of implementing so that we increase inclusion in this segment? And if the answer to all of those is a yes, 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 then clearly from the get-go, then it's just really a matter of, yes, we have the right partner. In terms of how do we now choose someone, or how do we partner in terms of execution? And the selection for that one is, if, for example, I won't answer for Kevin and Earl on more or less why they selected Western Union on that end. On our end, it's really more of, when we partnered with Techstars on this one, it's a process of selection as well, and coaching and mentoring, and ultimately figuring out who's the right partner in this one. So it's not simply, off the bat we say, oops, this sounds sexy. They're Filipinos. We have a common market. That's it. So it's really more of the rigor of the 13-week, more or less mentoring, coaching, trying to discuss, come up with something, will show and will simply highlight the passion and focus that the partner can bring into the table. And we are happy with what we're seeing. And we think that we share the same values, we share the same strategy, we see the same passion, and that should address also execution. And in fact, as part of the timetable, what we are looking at is, we're already in the process of exploring what is that service and product that we need to launch in market. And we're really hoping that early 2021, we should be available in market. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, and we're thrilled and grateful to have this partnership with Western Union as well, and that through the accelerator program, then Western Union and Techstars has given us a large number of mentors and actionable advice for us to be able to push through here. And on the as well as on the technical side as well, just the data readiness of Western Union has been a real benefit for the partnership here. As was mentioned earlier, then there are a number of enterprises, large enterprises in the Philippines and other places, where data readiness just isn't quite there yet to enable partnerships that involve the processing and the utilization of data here. And it can be really important for these changing times, that in order to react to this shift in the pandemic, then we need to understand really well what's going on. And we do that with a data-driven approach. And if you haven't if you're an organization that hasn't made some of your first technical hires for your data team, then please do. We'd be happy to help provide some guidance there. Not just to be able to partner with Plentina potentially, but also just to make a more seamless set of business services that you can provide to the Philippines and the world, really. So there's just so much opportunity for us to provide faster and more seamless services with data teams. So please support your local data scientists in the Philippines this way.
Yeah, and I guess some thoughts from me, right? Like putting on kind of my startup founder hat. Um, a lot of companies right now, it seems that partnering with startups is like a shiny ball that CEOs want to show their stockholders, right? Sometimes. So there's a lot of times that people say, "Oh, actually, yeah, this companies are saying that they want to partner with startups," but you really know that they want to do it if they've invested and if they really want to support, right? And that's why for example, with the Techstars Western Union, we really knew that, let's say, Western Union was serious, right? Because they partnered with Techstars in order to find, some of the best fintech, financial inclusion, cross-border startups in the world, right? And that level of seriousness coming from the top is extremely important because as a startup, it's very difficult to partner with an organization already, right? And if you don't have that alignment from the top, then it becomes, instead of taking 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, it might take you 2 years, right? And for a startup, like, you might not even exist in 2 years if you don't have some of these partnerships, right? And what I actually really appreciated with the Google Cloud team, especially in the Philippines, even if we were just an idea, the technology team kept on asking us how we can help you, right? And it was just, I guess, Kevin and I at the time. And one of the solution architects kind of reached out to us and say, "Hey, how can Google Cloud help you?" And that level, I guess, of understanding what the startup feels like, understanding how difficult it is already, and that notion of, like, even if I'm a large company and I represent a large company, I want to help you because eventually, if you grow, we grow together. I think that's not common. So if you find a partner that has that DNA as a startup founder, you go and make sure you partner with them.
I also
Yeah,
want
thanks
to,
everyone.
if I may, so I've also failed to mention a while ago, and it also touches on what Freddie did mention on selection. Um, it's also important that you have a view of what success looks like by way of what the partnership can deliver. So I talk about values, I talk about strategy, but in this partnership, it's not just doing it for the sake of doing it, just because you tick all the box. So there has to be also a view of what's that measure or outlook of success in terms of the partnership should look like. And of course, if you're now talking of, it could be different when you talk when Earl and Kevin might define it. It could be different, but normally for us in the corporate side, generally on our end, we look at it that is does this partnership push the envelope of innovation? Because a while ago I did say that we've entered. I joined Western Union at a time of transformation and changing things. So does it more or less push that envelope of innovation? And can you see, feel it, and really see it in market? So that's one. The other one is about ultimately if this ramps up and it has the potential to ramp up and be successful to be able to deliver to the bottom line and returns to the investment. So that becomes now a belief in the product that you're selling or you're developing. And I know, for example, aside from cross-border remittances in Philippines, credit is also key because I know that an OFW, even though if you send them, let's say, money, there's always that emergency situation where they would need more. It's always not enough. So it quickly bridges to that facility of loans and other sources on how they can get. And with the right scoring that Kevin and Earl is introducing here, with the right understanding of our customer, then it builds that proposition of a better and stickier product. So if that is the belief, which we strongly say that yes, it makes a lot of sense, then it's easier to project and say, if we do this right, execute it well, with the right people, technology, partnership, then you can see that it can lead to ramp up and it can lead to something in the bottom line.
Thank you for that, everyone. Actually, now that everybody's been talking about the partnerships, I'm sure there's a burning question in the minds of all of our viewers here. I've always said myself, I'm a partnerships guy as well, but I've always believed, I don't know if you guys will agree with me, but I've always believed that partnerships takes a very different kind of dedicated animal to see to the end and beyond, right? The four of you guys have talked so much about it already, right? It requires almost for all of the stars to align to even get in the door and then take it to the next level. That's a whole different animal. And very few people are capable of doing that. And the four of you have also been part of these huge players, either previously or right now. So the question in everybody's mind is, if it's so hard, why bother? Why not do it yourselves? I mean, your companies, right?
I just a quick stab on that one. I truly agree. Partnerships are not easy to form or to build. I think there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen and a lot of alignment that needs to happen. It's not because that you have the right solution that the partnership will automatically happen, or if I have the right vision or insight that the partnership will have to happen. There's really a lot of alignment in my experience with regards to values and motivations. I mean, most startups are created not just because I would like to have a big company, but I really have a very specific motivation, either to help the country or either to be able to make an impact in either specific community or even be able to just make sure that I'm able to provide jobs to the people that I hire. So, I mean, those are very specific motivations. And I think the partnership only happens, that alignment happens, that's the same motivation that I would like to support. I mean, and once that happens, that's actually how it works. And there's that I think for me that's the most crucial one. Um, would because it's challenging that you would rather do it on your own. I think yes, of course. I don't think there's a survivability factor if you do that. I mean, probably there's some initial success, but really there's no, I would say, continuity of that direction. I mean, especially if your motivation is to grow, or either hire people or support the country. There's a lot of things that you have to understand. You have to understand what the challenge is, and you have to understand who are you really, who are you really helping, and where are they coming from. And there's a lot of conversations with government, with other communities, with corporate, and with companies like us to make sure that, to your point, and everything aligns. That I'm now able to find, I would say, a runway wherein I can make sure that I'm able to deliver and make flight of what my vision is.
I'll answer that, Alex, differently. And and to your point, yes, partnerships are difficult, but quite honestly, partnerships are fun. So if you really look at it from a perspective also of learning, then partnerships are fun. And there's always different routes in. If you say, for example, I want to expand, there's always I want to grow, I want to expand, I want to do X. There are always several ways of doing it, and there's always at the minimum two options. There could be more, but at the minimum two. One is I do it myself, and the other one is I do it with someone else. So and it's easy for you to make a decision on which route to take, provided that you're humble enough to admit if you have weaknesses and core strength. And I think we can say that not all companies has a monopoly of all strength. For example, in Western Union, we can be very strong in terms of our network footprint. We can be strong in our compliance programs. But if we say I want to add a new service that makes it stickier, I know, let's say that loans could be something logical for my customer set. And the capability that I need could be the best credit scoring or some other competence in this discipline. Yes, I can choose to say I can build it, but is that my strength? That is not my strength. And if you do understand what is it that you can bring into the table and find a partner that has that strength that can bring that into the table, then it's just really a matter of fine tuning and you can do the expansion. So why partner? Because sometimes the cost of building it yourself and learning it is more expensive and it's longer, as opposed to doing a partnership which is more efficient and could be faster to go to market. So that's how I'm gonna address that question.
Yes, I'll second that. And that, whether you're a small company or some of the world's largest companies, sometimes even if you have all the resources in the world, you will not be able to replicate the capability of, be it a startup or another company that you could partner with by yourselves. Sometimes just because it's outside of your DNA, outside the wheelhouse that you do. There's certain skills that I would still want every company to build up internally, and especially when it comes to data literacy, then if you can build an in-house data team, at least one, maybe two hires, then it helps you interface that and build partnerships beyond that. But if there are products and services that you can take a look at your team and you just do the math, it would cost us this much money and this much time in order to spin that up, and we need it at this point. Then yes, at that point, then partnerships are the way to go.
Yeah, and I mean, thank you guys for that. I guess the keyword here is the world has changed, whereas before everybody wanted to do everything themselves. Now is if you find the right person, then it's worth it. And we're people have had to grow over the years and evolve now because society says it's okay to say you're not good at something. And the same goes for companies. And I second that what Jeff said as well. To admit that you're not good at something allows you to find somebody else who is and work with them. Now, um, I think one of the things that Jeff had been talking about as well was with Western Union and how remittances will play a big factor in how data is changing that, and partnerships in Western Union's remittance, but lending is another core competency. Now, Earl, I know you've been doing a lot of partnerships discussions. This is your forte. Like, what other industries do you see that would benefit from this kind of partnerships, especially with the ones that can leverage this data? That everybody has that they might not even realize that they do.
Yeah, I think I think in the end of the day, why partner and why especially a data partnership, right? And it's because you want to unlock something, right? And for example, we're trying to find partners who believe that because of the data that they already have, we can unlock access to credit for them, right? Access to something that they can't maybe have now, but then they need it right now, right? And but they have the propensity to pay within a set time period. And I think that's really something, right? It's very freeing, right? At least for a consumer, where I know that I'm not constrained with the cash in my wallet right now, but someone else, institutions, partners that we like, believes in me that I will actually use the service and then pay in the future. And that level of trust. So I mean, people call it a credit score. I personally call it a trust score, right? Like, and in the end of the day, we really want partners who align in that vision and who think that their customers will benefit from that, right? What more than, let's say if you're a big merchant, let's say 7-Eleven says, you know what, you've been good and a good customer to us. We trust you. That's why we're offering you something like Plentina. Like, that's an amazing story, right? So for us, like, that's really the type of ethos that we want. And again, Jeff and Ferdy mentioned, like, it's the values that we want for the partners that we want to integrate with.
Thank you. I think we have time for about the last question. I think it's only fitting that we end with a regional question, because I said earlier in the beginning that even at Plentina and actually everybody here, we're all looking at the region in one way. For us, we're starting in the Philippines. So maybe for somebody who's used to doing these data partnerships, actually whose goal is to support this, maybe Sir Ferdy, would you like to talk about the other countries other than the Philippines, and you see how they're using data partnerships, and maybe the folks here could learn something from those insights?
Sure. So actually, if you look at I cover countries like the Philippines, Vietnam, and Thailand, and just comparing those countries with regards to AI adoption, I can see that there are certain and there are different maturities by which organizations are adopting machine learning and AI. So, for example, for me, I would say Vietnam is one of those countries that has the most number of digital natives and digital startups. and fintechs are there, and they're already in an area where if I am a fintech company, I'm not just in the service of providing digital payment facilities, but they are also now moving into like what Plentina is doing, which is really more on providing credit services, because they know that this is a natural extension of my service. I'm already covering payment. I'm already trying to make sure that my service and facilities available in most retail companies and most even government. Now, how do I make sure that I'm able to offer additional services like banking services? So they're now in that maturity. For enterprises, for countries like in Thailand, most of the banks have already 100% adopted digital services. I mean, there was a situation in Thailand a couple of years ago where the banking services was reduced. So which means that interbanking transactions, there's not a lot of money to be made. That most of the banks now have to look for ways on how do we get our where are we going to derive our services from now. So they kind of opened up all of their line of banking applications and offered it to the fintechs, so that they now have more areas of cooperation or extending their services. And again, machine learning and AI is key to that. I mean, if you are getting insights from multiple sources, now your direction is how do I make sure that I'm able to provide the right service at the right time and predict the activity so that I can get more transactions and invite more customers to my platform. In the Philippines, it's happening. I mean, we're seeing some of the banks. We're seeing a lot of fintech companies. There are still, I would say, some things that we have to work from a regulatory point of view to make sure that it's more open and transparent. But I think we're headed in the right direction. The challenge for us, and I think the advantage for us, is we have the talent here. I mean, looking at the other countries, I can confidently say that the talent is in the Philippines. I mean, from our like Earl and Kevin, who decided to go back to the Philippines, coming from their experiences in the US. I mean, these are just a showcase of the people going back to the country and really trying to support. I think it's like we have the talent, but we just have to make sure that we are now delivering the right service and solutions. To Jeff's point, we have a lot of unbanked Filipinos in this country, which makes it the biggest opportunity for us. I don't think it's the right motivation, but if you even compare us to the countries like Vietnam and Thailand, we're still in a pretty much dire predicament because of the COVID situation compared to these countries. In fact, in one of my conversations, like it's better in the Philippines. Of course, I don't mean to say that this situation is okay, but because of this current situation, there's still a pickup of digital transactions. Where in these other countries, they have now more pivoted back to normal, where they're now just seeing what a normal situation would be or what a normal transaction would be. So we're still in that, we still have that opportunity to really, I would say, transform our services.
Well, thank you, Sir Ferdy. That's actually very well said. Using that weakness and turning that into an opportunity to further experiment, because we're forced to on these digital transactions, right? So that's about all the time that we have today for our panel. Once again, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in, our viewers, wherever you might be in the world. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you again to our panelists, Sir Ferdy from Google Cloud, Sir Jeff Navarro from Western Union, and of course our founders, Earl dialing in from the East Coast and Kevin dialing in from the West Coast.